Look, I need to tell you something that's going to hit you like a freight train. If you've been watching home prices climb month after month, year after year, thinking this madness will never end, you're about to witness something nobody saw coming. We're not talking about a gentle market correction here. We're talking about 10 American cities where home prices are about to absolutely crater. And I mean crater hard. You've been watching this insanity unfold, haven't you? Scrolling through listings where a basic three-bedroom house costs more than your parents' dream home from 20 years ago. You've probably felt that gut punch when you realize your savings account that felt substantial last year now covers maybe 10% of a down payment. And every month you wait, hoping things will cool down. Prices just keep climbing higher and higher. But here's what they don't want you to understand. The same forces that created this housing nightmare are about to snap back with devastating precision. And when I say devastating, I'm talking about price drops that will make 2008 look like a practice round. We're looking at potential declines of 20, 30, even 40% in some markets. That's not fear-mongering. That's mathematical reality based on data that's hiding in plain sight. I've spent months diving deep into housing market analytics, mortgage data, inventory reports, and economic indicators that most people never see. What I discovered will completely change how you think about buying, selling, or even renting in America right now. Because this isn't just about home prices. This is about entire regional economies that built their foundation on sand, and that sand is about to shift. Now, before we dive into these 10 cities, I want you to understand something crucial. This information could save you from the biggest financial mistake of your life, or it could help you position yourself to capitalize on opportunities that only come around once in a generation. Either way, you need to know what's coming, because ignorance in this market isn't bliss. It's financial suicide. Hit that like button right now if you want to stay ahead of this crash, because what I'm about to reveal is information that real estate agents, developers, and local governments desperately don't want getting out. And make sure you subscribe because I'll be tracking this collapse in real time as it unfolds over the next 12 to 18 months. Here's the brutal truth about what's actually happening in American housing markets right now. While everyone's been focused on mortgage rates and inventory shortages, something far more significant has been quietly building momentum. We're seeing a perfect storm of economic forces that's about to unleash the most dramatic housing correction in modern history. The data is absolutely staggering. According to the latest reports, nearly one-third of the largest 100 housing markets in America are already showing annual price declines. That's not a slowdown. That's the beginning of an avalanche. And it's accelerating faster than anyone predicted. From January to April of this year alone, the number of markets experiencing year-over-year price drops increased from 10% to 27%. Think about that progression. In just 4 months, we went from 31 markets declining to 80 markets declining. That's not a trend. That's a collapse in motion. But here's where it gets really terrifying. The markets leading this decline aren't random. They're concentrated in specific regions that experienced the most dramatic price increases during the pandemic housing boom. We're talking about Sunbelt cities that saw home values double or even triple in just 3 years. And now physics is kicking in. What goes up that fast and that far doesn't land softly. The Sunbelt correction is already underway, and it's brutal. Tampa Bay home prices have dropped over 6% year over year. Austin, the poster child for pandemic-era real estate madness, is down nearly 6% and falling fast. Miami, Orlando, Dallas, Phoenix, these aren't minor market adjustments. These are the opening moves of a comprehensive regional collapse. And here's what makes this different from previous housing corrections. The fundamentals supporting these inflated prices have completely evaporated. During the pandemic, millions of people relocated from expensive coastal cities to cheaper Sunbelt markets, driving up demand and prices. But that migration wave has not just slowed, it's reversed in many areas. Remote work policies that allowed this geographic arbitrage are disappearing as companies force employees back to offices. Tech layoffs have eliminated thousands of high-paying jobs that supported expensive housing markets. And the cost advantages that made these markets attractive have been obliterated by insurance costs, property taxes, and climate risks that nobody factored into their calculations 3 years ago. Let's talk about Florida for a minute, because what's happening there is a preview of what's coming to other overheated markets. The state's median home price has dropped below the national average for the first time in years. Property insurance costs have tripled or quadrupled in some areas. Major insurance companies have simply stopped writing new policies, leaving homeowners scrambling for coverage that can cost more than their mortgage payments. Some Florida homeowners are seeing tax bills that have doubled or tripled in a single year. When your insurance costs $15,000 annually, your property taxes hit another $12,000, and you're dealing with hurricane risks every summer, that beach house paradise starts looking like a financial prison. Texas is experiencing similar dynamics but with different triggers. The state's major metropolitan areas saw some of the most dramatic pandemic-era price increases in the country. Austin home prices more than doubled between 2020 and 2022. But now the tech companies that drove that boom are laying off workers by the thousands. Oracle, Tesla, Dell, Apple, they're all restructuring their Texas operations. Meanwhile, inventory has exploded. Builders who ramped up construction thinking the boom would last forever are now completing projects in a market where buyers have evaporated. Days on market have increased from single digits to over 2 months in many Texas cities. Price reductions are becoming the norm, not the exception. The mathematics of these markets simply don't work anymore. In Austin, the median home price still sits around $650,000, while median household income struggles to reach $75,000. That's nearly 9 times annual income for a basic house. Historically, sustainable home prices run about 3 to 4 times annual income. We're not talking about a minor correction here. We're talking about a fundamental repricing that could see values drop 30 to 40% just to reach historical norms. California markets present a different but equally concerning picture. San Francisco, despite its reputation for resilience, has seen home prices drop over 10% from recent peaks. The tech industry that underpinned Bay Area real estate is contracting rapidly. Major companies are not just allowing remote work, they're encouraging it to reduce expensive office leases. The commercial real estate collapse in downtown San Francisco is dragging residential values down with it. When office buildings sit 35% vacant and major retailers abandon entire districts, the spillover effect into residential markets is inevitable. Property tax revenues decline, city services deteriorate, and the quality of life advantages that justified premium housing costs disappear. Phoenix represents another fascinating case study in bubble dynamics. This desert city experienced massive population growth during the pandemic as Californians fled high taxes and expensive housing. But Phoenix has infrastructure problems that make long-term growth questionable. Water supplies are critically low with Lake Mead at historic lows and Colorado River allocations being cut. The summer of 2024 saw temperatures that made the city nearly uninhabitable for months. Air conditioning costs that rival mortgage payments, combined with water restrictions and insurance companies fleeing the market due to wildfire risks, are making Phoenix's growth story unsustainable. These aren't isolated problems affecting individual cities. They're systematic issues that reveal fundamental flaws in how these markets developed during the pandemic boom. The question isn't whether these corrections will continue. The question is how far and how fast they'll fall before finding new equilibrium levels that actually make economic sense. Portland shows us what happens when a city's entire economic foundation crumbles beneath the weight of poor policy decisions and social chaos. This isn't just about housing anymore. This is about watching an American city collapse in real time while real estate values follow it straight into the ground. The median home price in Portland still hovers around $525,000, but that number is meaningless when the city itself is becoming unlivable. Nike, Portland's largest private employer, just announced they're moving major operations to Tennessee. Intel is slashing 15,000 jobs from their Hillsborough facility. These aren't small businesses closing shop. These are the economic engines that kept Portland's housing market artificially inflated. Downtown Portland looks like a post-apocalyptic movie set. Commercial vacancy rates have hit 32%. That's 1 in 3 buildings sitting completely empty. When the commercial core of a city dies, residential property values don't just decline, they collapse. The ripple effect is already showing in the data with inventory up over 40% and homes sitting on the market for months without offers. But here's what makes Portland's situation particularly devastating. The city has a 9.9% state income tax on top of crushing property taxes averaging 1.5% annually. They just passed additional capital gains taxes that are driving anyone with money to flee across the river to Vancouver, Washington. When you can save $50,000 a year in taxes by moving 20 minutes north, guess what rational people do? The social decay isn't helping property values either. Homeless encampments have taken over entire neighborhoods. Crime rates are spiking. Insurance companies are either pulling out completely or charging premiums that make homeownership financially impossible for most families. State Farm won't even write new policies in certain zip codes anymore. Comment below if you think Portland can recover from this death spiral, because honestly, I'm not seeing a path back. When your major employers are leaving, your tax base is fleeing, and your city services are failing, real estate becomes worthless no matter what the listing price says. But Portland's problems look manageable compared to what's happening in Seattle. The Emerald City is facing an economic earthquake that's about to shake its housing market to pieces. Amazon just mandated that all employees return to office 5 days a week. Sounds like good news for Seattle real estate, right? Wrong. Because all those remote workers who moved to Tacoma, Everett, and Bellingham thinking they'd beaten the system are now completely screwed. Meanwhile, Amazon is simultaneously laying off thousands of workers while demanding the rest come back to downtown Seattle. Microsoft cut 11,000 jobs. Boeing is moving production to South Carolina. The startup ecosystem that created paper millionaires waiting for IPOs has completely dried up. Venture capital funding in the region dropped 67% year over year. Commercial real estate downtown is 32% vacant. Amazon is trying to sublease 1.5 million square feet of office space they can't use. When the biggest employer in the city is trying to dump massive amounts of real estate, what do you think that does to overall property values? The median home price in Seattle still sits at $850,000. But homes are sitting on the market for months with no offers. Inventory has increased 180% year over year. Price reductions are becoming standard, with builders offering 2-to-1 buy-downs, free upgrades, and paying all closing costs just to move properties. And here's the social component that nobody wants to discuss publicly. Crime is out of control. Homelessness is visible everywhere. The Seattle freeze has become the Seattle exodus, as people leave not just for economic reasons, but for basic quality of life. When your biggest employers are either laying people off or forcing them back to an increasingly dangerous downtown, the housing market math stops working. Subscribe right now if you want to see this train wreck in slow motion, because Seattle's correction is just getting started. Now let's talk about Las Vegas, where the entire economy runs on borrowed money and borrowed time. This desert mirage built itself into a housing market that defies every principle of sustainable economics. The median home price hit $440,000 in a city where the average income is $58,000. That's nearly 8 times annual income for a house in a place with no water and no real economic base beyond gambling and tourism. The California exodus that fueled Vegas growth has completely stopped. Population growth has slowed to under 1% annually, far below the boom years when it topped 2%. But builders kept building like the party would never end. There are currently 20,000 housing units under construction in a market that's essentially stopped growing. The short-term rental market that propped up investor demand has collapsed. Vegas had 15,000 Airbnb properties at peak. The city just passed regulations limiting them, and occupancy rates have dropped 40%. All those investors who bought houses to rent to bachelor parties and convention goers are panic selling, flooding the market with inventory nobody wants. But here's the real killer for Vegas real estate: climate change and water scarcity. Lake Mead is at 27% capacity. The Colorado River allocations that keep this desert city alive are being cut every year. Summer temperatures are reaching levels that make the city uninhabitable for months, without air conditioning costs that rival mortgage payments. Insurance companies are fleeing the market due to wildfire risks around the city's edges. Property taxes are climbing as the city tries to maintain infrastructure in a desert that was never meant to support 2 million people. The desperation is already showing, with builders offering massive incentives, agents paying personal credits to buyers, and properties sitting for months with multiple price reductions. When you build a city in a desert with no water, no sustainable economy beyond tourism, and housing prices that require California incomes to afford, physics eventually catches up. Vegas is about to learn that the house doesn't always win, especially when the house is built on sand. Denver represents perhaps the most dramatic example of pandemic-era insanity meeting economic reality. This mile-high city stared down at mile-deep housing corrections that are just beginning to unfold. The median home price still hovers around $550,000, but here's the problem. The population growth that justified those prices has not just stopped, it's reversed. For the first time in decades, Denver's population is actually declining. The Colorado gold rush that brought millions of new residents during the pandemic has turned into the Colorado exodus. Net migration into the Denver metro has collapsed by nearly 70% since 2015. When people stop coming and start leaving, housing demand evaporates overnight. But the supply side tells an even scarier story. Builders are still completing projects that were planned when Denver seemed like the next great American boomtown. New inventory is hitting a market with declining demand, giving buyers more leverage every single month. When population declines and listings rise simultaneously, the landing isn't soft, it's brutal. The affordability gap in Denver is mathematically unsustainable. Median household income sits around $75,000, which, by traditional metrics, supports a home price of about $225,000. We're not talking about minor overvaluation here. We're looking at prices that are 170% above what local incomes can actually support. The outdoor lifestyle and beer culture that attracted millennials to Denver are real attractions, but they don't pay mortgages. When the fundamental economics don't work and population growth reverses, even the most desirable cities face harsh corrections. Denver looks set for a fall that could strip 40% off home values before finding sustainable levels. But if you want to see all these problems concentrated into one perfect storm of real estate destruction, we need to talk about our final city. The place where every single factor we've discussed comes together to create what might be the most dramatic housing collapse in modern American history. Miami is ground zero for the perfect storm that's about to obliterate American housing markets. This isn't just another overpriced city facing a correction. This is a complete systematic breakdown of everything that made real estate seem like a sure thing for the past decade. The numbers alone should terrify anyone holding Miami real estate. Home insurance costs have exploded to an average of $11,000 per year. That's nearly $1,000 every month just for basic coverage, if you can even find a company willing to write a policy. 7 major insurance providers abandoned Florida entirely last year, leaving homeowners scrambling for coverage through state-run programs that charge 3 to 4 times market rates. But insurance is just the appetizer. The main course is what's happening with foreign investment, which has been the backbone of Miami's luxury market for decades. International buyers made up nearly 50% of sales back in 2018. Today, they represent just 10%, the lowest level since 2015. When Saudi sovereign wealth funds are dumping $4.7 billion in U.S. residential holdings, that smart money's seeing something average Americans don't. The condo market tells the real story of what's coming. After Surfside collapse exposed decades of deferred maintenance across Miami's aging building stock, every structure over 30 years old needs comprehensive structural inspections. The results are financially devastating. Special assessments of $100,000, $200,000, even $300,000 per unit are becoming standard. Imagine buying a $500,000 condo, then getting hit with a $200,000 repair bill that you have to pay immediately or face foreclosure. That's happening right now across Miami-Dade County. Owners are walking away from properties they can't afford to maintain, flooding the market with distressed inventory that nobody wants to touch. The rental market that supported investor demand has completely collapsed. Vacancy rates doubled in 6 months. Rents are down 15% and falling as 25,000 new luxury units come online over the next 2 years. These weren't built for local renters making $60,000 annually. They were designed for international investors and remote workers who've already fled to cheaper markets. Climate change delivers the final blow to Miami's real estate fantasy. Whether you believe in global warming or not, insurance companies base their rates on actuarial data that shows Miami has become uninsurable. Hurricane risk, flooding, sea level rise, the mathematical models all point to the same conclusion. $4.5 trillion in coastal real estate will be worthless by 2040, and Miami sits right in the crosshairs. The migration patterns that built Miami's boom are reversing at warp speed. New York finance bros and California tech workers who thought they'd found paradise are discovering that paradise comes with costs they never calculated. When your insurance equals your mortgage payment, your HOA fees hit another $1,000 monthly, and you're facing special assessments that could bankrupt you, that beachfront lifestyle loses its appeal fast. But here's what makes Miami's situation uniquely catastrophic. The entire economy is built on real estate speculation, tourism, and financial services tied to Latin American money laundering. When real estate collapses, tourism follows, and international capital flows dry up, there's no economic foundation left to support the population that moved there during the boom. The warning signs are flashing red everywhere you look. Inventory has exploded over 40% in the past year. Days on market have tripled from 20 to 60 days. Nearly half of all listings now include price reductions, and sellers are throwing everything at buyers who simply don't exist anymore. Free Tesla with your condo purchase isn't a marketing gimmick. It's desperation. Comment what you think Miami's bottom will be. because the mathematical model suggests we could see 50 to 60% corrections in some neighborhoods. When insurance becomes impossible, international money flees, and climate risks make properties literally uninhabitable, there's no floor to how far prices can fall. The psychological component of this collapse cannot be overstated. For decades, Americans have been conditioned to believe real estate always goes up. Buy now or be priced out forever became the national motto. But what happens when an entire generation realizes they've been sold a lie? When people understand that housing markets can and do collapse, panic selling accelerates the very crash everyone feared. The housing crash isn't coming, it's here. These 10 cities are just the beginning of a nationwide correction that will reshape American real estate forever. Whether you're buying, selling, or holding, the decisions you make in the next 6 months will determine your financial future for decades. Stay informed, stay prepared, and remember that in every crisis lies opportunity for those who see it coming first.